Hi guys, what is going on? And welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So today we're going to be diving into the Season 6 patch notes. Unfortunately, my.com decided they didn't want me to have them in advance this time, so sorry I'm a little bit late on the patch notes. Obviously normally I like to try and get them out kind of on the day they release, but yeah, it was a little bit difficult. But here we are, and quite a lot is changing this season. Obviously we have the stuff that we all by this point all know about. We know about the 3 promoted units that we're getting, the upgraded versions of the Halberdiers, the Yeomen and the Fire Lancers. We know all that's coming, but there's quite a bit of sort of behind the scenes stuff that I wasn't necessarily expecting to change. A good example of this is, for example, the shared unit experience. So this is basically going to be like a sort of free experience, a free unit XP. So if you bring a unit into battle that's currently levelling up, then you're going to get 100% of the base experience to that unit, but then you're going to get 10% of that going into a shared unit experience pool. But more than that, if you bring units that are all fully levelled, then the 100% amount of unit experience that they're going to be earning is going to go straight into the shared experience pot. So in effect, this now means you're going to be able to bring your favourite warband rather than the one you're specifically trying to level. So say if you've got level 1 Winged Hussars, and you really don't want to have to grind them through the lower levels, you can actually play with different units, different infantry, etc., and then use that experience you earn from playing them to just level up your Winged Hussars. So it's going to kind of make it a little bit more dynamic. I kind of not sure if this is a good thing or not really. While it does on the surface sound quite nice to be able to all play our favourite units rather than having to sort of grind out the units that we don't enjoy in quite such the same way, I think it's going to reduce unit variety in battles. I kind of like seeing people grinding out rattan shields and other slightly crappy units, and I think we're going to miss that once we get this shared unit experience sort of brought in. So it's certainly going to change the way things play, and it's certainly going to feel a little bit different, but I'm not entirely sure if it's a positive or a negative really. Another one of the events I kind of didn't expect to come in with Season 6 is the Ruined Fief PvE mode. So in effect, from the lore point of view, Ostaria has basically been ruined by bands of marauders, and you've got to help both sort of relieve the cities from the rebels, and then you've got to help rebuild them. So it's basically going to take part in a series of stages, starting with the opening of the campaign on the 21st, which then it will open up more from the 29th of December. You're going to be sort of able to engage these marauder bands in the open world and attack some of these fiefs as part of the matchmaking as well. And you're going to be initially trying to clear out these marauders, and then you're going to have to be trying to rebuild the cities from the 4th of January in campaign stage 3. So then you're going to be able to sort of donate resources, try and complete quests, and sort of assist in the rebuilding of these cities. And the houses that contribute the most will then end up effectively owning the fiefs and gaining regional influence from owning them. So it's going to actually change things up from a territory war point of view a fair bit as well. So kind of an interesting mechanic. And on top of that, you're going to be earning a currency called Lions. Bit of a strange name, but I think it's going to act like a sort of third seasonal currency. And there's going to be a Lion store. From the image they've actually put into the patch notes, which is worth checking out, there's some really interesting things in the Lion store. Specifically, there looks like there's a purple horse, and having actually tried that purple horse out on the test server, if it's going to stay as good as it was on the test server, that is a purple horse you are going to want to be getting. It's a really important one. There's also some pretty cool schematic chests, including an epic schematic chest and an exclusive attire as well. So a little bit of stuff that you're going to be wanting to doing. So taking part in the Ruined Fiefs events over the course of the season is something you're probably going to be wanting to doing. If not from a territory war point of view, then certainly from the point of view of trying to get access to some of these things that are in the Lion store. And it is going to be cohort friendly. We've also got things like dynamic weather being introduced. Kind of, again, a bit of a strange one, didn't see this one coming, but basically there's going to be changeable weather conditions in different regions. So for example, they're classing Ostaria, hot and humid in summer, cold and arid during winter. And the different weather types are going to affect how your units handle in the open world. It is going to be pretty much an open world only dynamic weather system though. It does go on to say that you know, you're going to get different effects. So for example, walking through snow, you're going to have much reduced movement speed, although apparently this movement speed can be increased by consuming winter ale, which I think is something that can be brought at the Tavern. And that's a new thing that's been introduced in this season. The Tavern is kind of a new building that they've put in pretty much all the main regional cities. But on top of that, let's move on to some of the balance changes then, because quite a lot of balance has happened, and most notably is the artillery changes. There have been huge nerfs in the way that artillery now handle and behave in game. So let's take an example. Let's take a purple mortar, probably one of the most useful of the artillery. So purple mortar is getting its hit points significantly reduced. It's going from 16,000 to 10,000, so it's losing about a third of its hit points. But the damage it does per hit is hugely nerfed. So purple mortar obviously does blunt damage, and it used to be 13,800, and that is being reduced down to 5,300. It's almost 2/3 of its damage is being reduced. I mean, that is huge. Purple mortars have pretty well dominated territory war, and certainly very, very effective in siege battles if people choose to deploy them. So it's such a huge nerf that, yeah, artillery is going to feel radically different, and it's certainly not going to be the game-changing equipment that it was before. Its reload time is the same, but it's even had its ammo reduced from 16 to 13. So this is just going to make a huge sort of reduction in the amount of damage things like this do. And it's changed pretty much for everything. For example, purple cannons from 11,400 damage to 6,610. So about half is damaged. Increased reload time, reduced ammo, and reduced explosion radius. So just all of it is being knocked down. Artillery is being about halved across the board in terms of its damage that it's capable of achieving. I think this is going to change a lot from a territory war point of view. You know, artillery is traditionally very dominant in territory war. It can also be extremely dominant in siege. If people are prepared to put in the money to throw a lot of artillery into sieges, then we see it quite a lot in many battles. So I think it's going to change up things like that quite a lot, and it's going to really kind of change the way that things have played. I think artillery did need a nerf. It was super dominant, and you know, people could play badly but just bring a good artillery with them and just get, you know, 50, 100 kills like that. So I think it is a positive change. I do wonder if perhaps sort of in the sort of classic Conqueror's Blade way, they might have slightly overdone it. These are some very hefty nerfs, and yeah, I do wonder if maybe they've done it a little bit too much. But I guess time will tell, and we'll see what this actually behaves like in battles. So that leads us on to the two hero changes that we've got. One of which, I must admit, is kind of surprising, and that is Poleaxe. Poleaxe is getting some huge across-the-board buffs, which I'm not entirely sure were warranted, really. So, for example, if we take Back to Corbin, that's the ability where they slash the Poleaxe side to side 3 times. A staple ability, pretty much every Poleaxe user is going to be using it. So, for example, on the third skill of that, they're taking up the damage quite significantly. So, for example, on the third attack, it's going from 113% basic to 140% basic slashing damage, and a significant increase to the base slashing. Plus, it's reducing enemy defenses by 60% for 5 seconds. So that's a 60% reduction in armor. So that's going to make a huge difference to the amount of damage the enemy is going to be taking from follow-up attacks. And things like this are kind of surprising. You know, on top of that, furthermore, Rough Justice. That's the one where the Poleaxe runs at you and locks you in the animation that you are, you know, unable to escape from. Cooldown reduction. Okay, at least it's not getting a damage buff, but from 50 seconds to 45 seconds on the ultimate. I'm not entirely sure that really needed a cooldown buff. So yeah, I was kind of surprised. And it's not just those two abilities. Lock of a Strike, Grim Harvest, Halberdier's Thrust, Weapon Dance, all getting buffs on all of the abilities. Kind of surprising. Not sure I necessarily agree with that. I mean, and this is from someone who played the Poleaxe for a long time and very much likes the Poleaxe as a class. I'm just not entirely sure it would have been the class that I would pick that's suffering the most in the game at the moment. So I think that's going to end up being a not necessarily super popular selection of changes. Moving on from the Poleaxe, we get the Longsword. Now this is a set of changes that I agree with a lot more. You know, the Longsword, let's face it, I don't think anyone's going to argue that the Longsword is a particularly overpowered class. it needs some love, and I have sort of no hesitation to say that these are a much better set of changes, and they're actually not even that dramatic. You know, martial prowess, 60% base to 80% base, and 100 extra slashing damage on it. Really not all that much in terms of big changes, but just giving a small buff, a small damage increase across a couple of the abilities to the longsword. Seems like a good set of changes in my opinion. Longsword does need a little bit of a damage output buff, because at the moment it's just a bit too low to realistically be helpful. So yeah, bit of a strange selection of balance changes in my opinion. Surprised they did the poleaxe, but agree with the longsword. So moving on from that, that leads us on to some unit changes. The primary one being Keshigs are getting changed. Not perhaps significantly, but there is some reduce the damage of Keshigs when they're charging at low speed. I think that's certainly a good one. It almost felt like a bug before, where once the Keshig completes its initial charge, it then turns around and runs back. But they turn around, and before they even move, they are basically hitting for full damage. So they can be basically stationary, yet still hitting like they're charging at full tilt. So good to see that that's been reduced, because Keshigs certainly are one of the more dominant cavalry units on the battlefield at the moment. They've also reduced the damage resistance when they're charging, and resolved the issue where they do that high damage on returning, which is kind of a bit of a bug. So that's good to see that that has been changed. Also kind of nice to see both the Rattan Vipers and the Rattan Pikemen both getting a little bit of a buff. Both very much need that. Hopefully you're actually going to have a video on the Rattan Vipers kind of shortly. Have got them leveled up, just need to get some good footage on them, and hopefully we'll be having that. Another good quality of life change is the introduction of blades. These are going to be effectively replacing the chalices in the seasonal store. So if you go and have a look at the seasonal store now, you'll see that obviously you have your seasonal currency, which you can use to buy treatises and this season's weapon skins, etc, etc. But if you get onto the chalices, you can then use that to buy some of the older seasonal attires, which have kind of been vaguely reskinned. It's like the antique attires, so you can get access to previous season's attires. Well, they're changing it now so that you're going to be earning blades, and blades do not expire at the end of the season. So for example, if you get halfway to an attire this season, then next season you can still use those blades. They're not going to run out. Your seasonal currency will still run out as normal, but the blades for the antique attires are still going to carry over season to season. And that seems like a positive change. Seems like a much better way of doing it, because getting up the enough blades to get the sort of 4,000 or 5,000 that you require to buy a hero attire is pretty difficult. So really pleased to see that they've introduced that. And as we get towards the end of the patch notes, there's a couple of other cool little things to cover. Firstly, they're changing up the weekly quests slightly, making them slightly easier, expanded the quest pool so there's a few more bits available, which is nice to see. So hopefully it should be now slightly easier to sort of completely fill out that 150 weekly quest points. I know I often don't end up getting them done. I normally make it to sort of like 120 or something, but normally miss a free battles or something like that and end up not quite getting them done. But they're also adding in a few other things. Grouping up with other players is going to grant an additional 5% bonus to bronze, honour and XP. All sort of help stack up. You know, if you put that onto a premium account, then you're up to 35%. Throw in a mercenary unit, that's a 45% bonus. So all these little bonuses all help stack up. So yeah, it's nice to see that they're kind of rewarding group play. They've also changed maximum respawn time. So if you get yourself killed in a siege battle, obviously the first time, you know, it's around 20 seconds, something like that, to respawn. And if you get yourself killed 3 or 4 times, you end up going up to 90 seconds that it takes to respawn. That is now being reduced down to a maximum respawn time of 75 seconds. And they're also allowing you to now reset your hero's attributes once per week for free. So if you've not got access to a personal history, you know, you don't want to buy one from either the smuggler or from the sovereign store, then once per week you are now going to be able to reset your attribute points. So that's going to be really good for people to be able to try out different builds, different classes, different setups, to see which ones they are going to be enjoying. And finally, when you get yourself killed now in battle, you're going to have access to a little button that says death info, and you can click on that and you can see how you died. You'll see basically what damage you're taking. That will say, you know, hit for 150 piercing damage from Domain Spearman. So then you know what's hitting you, you'll know what actually hit you and got you killed. And that really about sums up the bulk of the main changes in the patch notes. There's lots of small little bits here and there, so if you want to know absolutely everything, then I'd really recommend you go and check them out and have a read of them. I'll put a link to them in the description, and I'll try, and if I can remember, I'll put one in the comments down below as well. So do go and check them out, but hopefully this video summary has kind of been vaguely useful. If it has, let me know what you think about this patch in the comments down below, and of course subscribe to the channel for lots more Conqueror's Blade content. Thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you all on the next video.